Welcome back to Papal Profiles. This week, we look at the Pope who traded in the Church's dreams for the return of the Papal States for something far more strategic, but also far more compromising. This is the story of Pope Pius XI and the unholy alliance he forged for the Vatican with the fascists. Between 1870 and 1929, successive popes styled themselves prisoners confined to the Vatican after Italian unification stripped them of the Papal States. It was baseless propaganda, but the Vatican princes clung to their belief that God would eventually restore their divine right to rule. Then, in 1922, two new men came to power, Mussolini in Rome and Pius XI in the Vatican, both authoritarian, both hostile to liberal democracy, both eager to use the other to further their own ends. In 1938, Pius would openly admit, if there is a totalitarian regime, totalitarian in fact and by right, it is the regime of the Church, because man belongs totally to the Church. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was Church theology following a millennia of European dominance to which he aspired to return. Pius began his papacy with the encyclical Ubi Arcano, condemning moral, legal, and social modernism. Like all his immediate predecessors, he railed against secular governments, women's immodesty, and the secularization of schools. The Great War, he claimed, was the fruit of humanity turning its back on God, and only the Church could restore peace. His logic was simple. If society rejects papal authority, it collapses. Of course, Pius conveniently overlooks other functioning non-Christian societies as inconvenient to his narrative. Then, after years of secret negotiations, in February 1929, the Lateran Accords were signed. The Church became the sovereign state of Vatican City. Consequently, many of the secular prohibitions of the Unification era imposed on the Church were reversed. Catholicism became Italy's only state religion. Mandatory religious instruction in schools was reintroduced. Crucifixes returned to public buildings. Church marriages were legally recognized. In return, the Vatican became what historian David Kurtzer called a willing partner of fascism. Church newspapers, especially the Jesuit journal La Civiltà Cattolica, ceased criticizing fascism and began promoting Mussolini's regime to faithful Catholics. Mussolini criminalized insulting priests. Fascist youth groups received clerical chaplains. Priests urged parishioners to vote fascists, with some priests literally escorting their flocks to polling stations. September 20th, the day of Italian unification, was replaced with February 11th, the anniversary of the Lateran signing. The Church had gone from prisoner to collaborator. With state backing secured, Pius turned inward, toward controlling private life. In 1930, he issued Casti Connubii, one of the most regressive encyclicals of the modern era. Contraception was condemned. Sex for pleasure was denounced, and women seeking independence were chastised as criminals against their own nature. The Vatican even tried to suppress a popular book advocating birth control and marital intimacy. The message was unmistakable. The authoritarian state would govern politics, the authoritarian church would govern bodies. 4 years later, the Vatican negotiated again, this time with Adolf Hitler. On July 20th, 1933, Cardinal Secretary of State Eugenio Pacelli, a few years later to become Pope Pius XII, signed the Concordat. The Church withdrew political opposition in Germany, and in return it was promised protection from German secular hobbling. It was a familiar pattern. But Hitler quickly violated the agreement, dissolving Catholic organizations, banning youth groups, suppressing the Catholic press. Only in 1937 did Pius XI issue the encyclical with deep anxiety, criticizing Nazi interference. It was smuggled secretly into Germany and read simultaneously from pulpits on Palm Sunday. But it avoided naming Hitler, it avoided mentioning Jews, and no excommunication ever came. In 1938, Mussolini introduced racial laws targeting Jews. Catholic publications praised aspects of the policy. The Vatican objected only when Jewish converts to Catholicism were excluded from protections guaranteed under the Lateran Treaty. On the broader Jewish persecution, complicit silence. For decades, Catholic press and pulpits had warned of Jewish influence and emancipation. When fascism codified these suspicions into law, resistance was muted. By 1939, Pius XI had grown disillusioned. He secretly commissioned an encyclical condemning anti-Semitism, Humani Generis Unitas. He prepared a speech that would denounce fascism on the 10th anniversary of the Lateran Accords. He died on February 10, 1939, the day before delivering it. His Secretary of State, Pacelli, ordered the speech drafts destroyed and shelved the encyclical. Weeks later, Pacelli became Pope Pius XII and would maintain a policy of wartime silence that remains controversial to this day. Pius XI secured Vatican sovereignty and restored Catholic dominance in Italian public life. But he did so through alliances with authoritarian regimes, silence in the face of racial persecution, and a theology that openly embraced institutional totality. The Papal States were gone, but in exchange the Vatican gained something arguably more powerful: permanent sovereignty and diplomatic leverage that it continues to wield to this day. Thanks for watching. Please check out the other videos on my channel if history is your thing, and see you next time.